Hi everyone, it's Henry here, and in this video we're going to take a little look at one of my personal army projects that I'm working on at the moment. I've had a few questions particularly about how I've done the armour colour on these guys, so I thought I'd do a little tutorial just going through my process for it. The army project is a Age of Sigmar Slaves to Darkness army. I have loved the whole vibe, everything to do with Chaos since the very early sort of realm of Chaos books, right the way through classic Weimar fantasy and then into Age of Sigmar. So I was really happy when they got their time in the sun, I don't know, about 18 months, 2 years ago almost now, that they really stuck to that aesthetic and they just made newer models that looked even better. What I've always particularly loved about the whole army is the artwork that we used to get through all the books, and particularly the stuff done by Adrian Smith. So I knew I had an idea of the sort of feel or the vibe I wanted to get across with the army. Then all I had to do was look at a few other key details that I wanted to hit with the project. I want to get it done, so at the minute I'm only working towards 1,000 points, just picking models I absolutely love. And I'm very fortunate in that from a gaming point of view, most picks are fun for this army. I've got a really good local gaming group, and we're doing a bit of a slow grow sort of Taylor Painters type thing for AOS, so we're all looking forward very much to the new release in a few weeks' time for third edition. So I had the idea, Adrian Smith artwork, want to get that right. It's going to be a gaming army, so it needs to look good underneath sort of, fairly crappy lighting, yellow lights, all that sort of thing. Doesn't matter so much what it looks like under a painting lamp or in photos. This has got to look fun on the table and just on the shelf in normal lighting. I want to try out a few different things on it, so I'm not pushing myself with my painting on this army, but I will try out a few new recipes, maybe even some techniques to try on the next army, which perhaps I would like to push a little bit further display-wise. And therefore, the big thing is it needs to be bright. It needs to be bright yet dingy, which is always good fun, right? Because weathering and battle damage and stuff always works better on brighter schemes. And the most important thing really is I wanted to enjoy the process. I've started and not finished umpteen Chaos armies over the years. So I really wanted to get through this. And part of that would be enjoying the end result, but part of it was just going to be enjoying, relaxing, sort of switching off and just enjoying painting. So let's have a look at how I've approached doing the armour. When it comes to army painting, I always try to paint the models in as few sub-assemblies as possible. These Chaos Warriors are push fit, so I've just left the shields off. It's really easy, you can see the peg that it slots onto, but just makes it a little bit easier to get to the details, which inevitably you end up painting really nicely and then just covering up with the shield. But I've started over a Chaos Black primer. Over the top of the primer, I'm going to base coat the whole model using Tamiya Flat Earth. This is a brown colour. I particularly enjoy working with Tamiya paints. As I say, this is a personal project. I didn't really have any intentions of doing tutorials or anything on it, but a few people have asked, so I do it. But it does mean that some of the processes won't necessarily be simple. Some of the products might not necessarily be super easy to get or super user-friendly. This was always going to be just a passion project, just enjoying something that I've loved the look of now for, 30 odd years. So yeah, fingers crossed we can at least get 1,000 points of these guys done. So I'm using Tamiya Flat Earth. I've thinned it approximately 3 drops of Tamiya X20A thinner to 1 drop of paint, possibly even 4 drops of thinner, just so it's spraying through without any splattering. And I'm spraying at 25 psi, and I'm using the Cult of Paint Infinity from Harder and Steenbeck's. There's a 0.4mm needle and nozzle in that. Couple of coats just to cover the black primer. You could argue use a grey primer or a white primer. Use whatever primer you want. I just use black on 90% of what I do, so I had a black can, so I sprayed it black. Now I want the main armour colour to be, as I've said, quite nice and bright, and I'm going to use a different paint over the top. And I'm not so much pre-shading at this stage. But I am adding some white where I want to put my highlights. So yes, I guess I am pre-shading in a way. I could probably just add a little bit of the white into the colour I'm going to put over the top and get a not dissimilar effect. And if I was to approach painting the army again, that's probably what I'd do. But I thought I'd show you exactly the process that I used for painting this armour. So I'm just spraying the white. Again, it's Tamiya, so it's Tamiya flat white, thinned, 4 or 5 drops of thinner to paint. I'm just spraying it roughly where I want the brightest points of the model to be. It's more or less zenithal highlighting. There's a tiny bit more sort of accuracy with it, but I'm not worrying. The goal of this army wasn't to really push my airbrushing or anything. I use the airbrush in most projects that I do, but I don't ever like my models to look overly airbrushed. So I do a lot of the shading and the highlighting with a traditional hairy brush. So the main colour for the armour is another Tamiya. This is Tamiya Deck Tan. Thin this 3 or 4 drops of thinner to paint, and just spraying this more or less all over. Might leave a tiny bit of the flat earth in the shadows, but it's just there to provide a little bit of colour in the shadows. If I sprayed it straight over the black, it would be all desaturated and horrible. It gives us a nice bright base to work from. And here's where we actually start getting real colour and interest into the armour. So I'm going to use a range of oil paints. I've begun with an ochre colour, so this is yellow ochre, Winsor Newton Artist Oil colour. Then I'm going to use a green. In this case, it's Abteilung 502 olive green. That's a huge blob of paint. I wouldn't use that across the entire army. That's always a bit annoying when that happens. Then I use a white, so for this I've just got Winsor Newton Artist Oil colour titanium white. Just go and use the oils that you like to use. I use Winsor Newton because that's what I've always used, and I would last colours are brown. This is Van Dyke brown, could be burnt umber, whatever you like, bit of brown. And Abteilung I've started using quite recently. The reason Abteilung are good is because they dry quicker. They just haven't got as much oil in them, so you can get things like Griffin Alkyd colours from Winsor Newton, exactly the same, just not as much oil in them. We don't need the paint to stay workable for as long as a canvas artist might. So that's why they're nice. The Abteilung colours are good though, because they've got a nice range of colours that aren't as easy to find sometimes. And now what I'm doing is applying random little dots of these colours all over the armour. White in particular is very strong, so I'd be quite sparing with it and mainly put it in the areas that are going to be highlighted. And the brown I'm going to apply more in the areas that would be in shadow. I also found during this scheme that the green was particularly powerful as well. And I didn't want them to look like super nurgly or anything like that. Although I am planning to sort of align them nurgle-wise, I would still quite like them to be maybe at the very beginning of that path, so just a little bit corroded, a little bit run down. And now I've just taken a synthetic brush, a fairly wide brush. I've dipped it in some mineral spirits. I always use Winsor Newton Sansador, so odourless mineral spirits, and I've touched off all the excess, so the brush is just damp really, and just moving the paint around across the surface. And you can see it sort of stains or filters or tints, whatever you want to call it. It just changes the colour of the paint underneath. The paint underneath hasn't had anything on it. It's just the Tamiya's just dry. As long as your acrylic paint's dry, you don't need to worry about varnishes or anything like that. You're not going to have any problems with it stripping the paint off. And light there was a little bit dark, so I just put a few more blobs of the white on. And I'll smush that around a bit, just make that a little bit lighter. When it comes to painting, obviously the shield's fairly easy. When it comes to painting the bodies of the warriors, I tended to work in sort of areas. You've got plenty of working time with these oils. I'm sure you could put it all over the model and then do it in one. But I quite liked working in sort of almost quarters. Also meant I was less likely to get loads of paint all over my hands. You can see on the inside of his thigh there the green, how strong the green is. But I really enjoy working with oil paints. I really enjoy this stage of the painting. It's quite relaxing. You don't really have to pay huge amounts of attention. That's probably the wrong way of putting it. You don't have to be super accurate with this stage. You can see already how it's changed the colour on those armour plates. Once that oil is dry, I move on to the battle damage / edge highlighting, and I'm using Vallejo model colour deck tan, and I just sort of stipple this along all the edges and create a few little chips with this. If you ever want to match, because Tamiya paints don't paint very nicely with a hairy brush at all, I've found that the Vallejo model colour series colour matches pretty closely to them. I presume that's because they both sort of style themselves towards military modelers. So, you know, I guess they try to be fairly accurate with their colours. But Vallejo model colour obviously paints beautifully with a paintbrush. And I would do this stippling all the way around all the armour. I'm just showing you on the shield because it's a bit easier. And then the second stage of chipping, I'm using a dark brown colour. In this case, I'm using Vallejo Panzer Ace's Dark Rust. I'm just painting in the chips now, all over the model. The armour is a very prominent feature on these warriors, and because I've chosen to do it in this colour, it's going to stand out a lot. So therefore, quite a lot of the time spent painting these is on the armour, and that's absolutely fine with me. You know, if I had 50 of them to paint, then I'm probably not going to do as much, spend as much time on it. One of the things I really like about the Chaos armies or Slave to Darkness armies is generally they are a bit more elite, which means that if you really enjoy your painting, you can take a little bit more time and still get your army done. And then the last stage for the armour, I've given the whole model a coat of gloss varnish. I use Vallejo polyurethane gloss, but whatever you want is fine. Is a pin wash, and I'm going to use AK Interactive panel liner for white and winter camo. It's sort of this greeny brown colour, and I'm thinning that down a little bit with the Sansador, and I'm just washing that all around the model, just in the recesses. The panels have got enough colour on them as is, so I don't need to sort of just wash it all over the model and remove it. You know, it's cleaner and simpler to apply it where I want it. You see what I mean about how effective a lighter coloured armour scheme is when it comes to damage and grime and whatnot. It just shows up so well, and on the table, that's exactly what I'm looking for. I like to leave enamel washes overnight to dry, and once they are, I hit the model with a coat of ultra matte varnish, Lucky varnish by Armour by MIG. Is my choice for the ultra matte. And that's all the stages for the armour. You see all that colour we've managed to get into it, but it's still nice and bright, so it should pop on the tabletop. I was going to try and not say pop. Once you've got all those other elements on the model, it just emphasises the armour even more. The only other thing I've done to it is at the very, very end I went in with some oil paint and I did a few little rusty streaks and brown streaks on the model, just with sort of neat oil paint. We've done a video dedicated to how we do that anyway, so I'll link that up in the top. I hope you've enjoyed taking a look at one of our personal projects. So this is my current fantasy army that I'm working on. Trying to stay focused and not start doing a bunch of Soulblight Gravelords. It's going okay. I've just got to get to that 1,000 points. I've got some Plague Bearers. I've got a few units of the Warcry Warbands. I think those models are incredible. So a few units of those I'm going to use. Unit of Knights. And then a character or two, and that'll do me for my 1,000 points. And then who knows, stick in Be'lakor and a Mega Gargant, that gets me up to 2k, I think, so good times. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope those of you that have asked how I've done the armour, this helps explain it to you. It's much easier to do it like this than it is to list it all, because I can give you a list of colours. It doesn't mean anything, right? You need to see how people apply them to get the effects they get. We'll be back on with our normal tutorial style soon. But if you have enjoyed the video, then hit that like button. If you're not already, hit subscribe. It really helps us out. And the best thing you can do if you really want to support us is tell your friends. You know, if you think they'd find this kind of stuff interesting, point them in our direction. So thanks very much for watching. and I'll see you next time.